Good morning. Welcome to the Hill Out Loud podcast. Today we have a guest, the beautiful Corey Davidson. Corey, can you tell us a little bit about yourself and what you offer and how to find you?
Sure. My name is Corey Davidson, and I am a clairvoyant healer and teacher. And you can find me at claircore.com or on YouTube, Claircore Energy Work. We do monthly podcasts on there. And, I love empowering people, to help themselves, nurture themselves, and empower them to be the best that they can be. So I do a lot of, and I do a lot of spiritual counseling, a lot of it.
I love that. So, I have a question for you about intuition, intuitive abilities, psychic. There's 100 different names how you can name it, but what does that mean to you? What does being psychic mean to you? And when did you discover that you were psychic?
Well, what being psychic or intuitive, means to me is listening to yourself, listening to that inner voice. I heard this quote one time, and it said, prayers are talking to the divine, God, creator, whatever you want to identify it as. So, prayer is talking to the divine, and hearing the divine is your intuition. So, intuition is being still long enough to hear that inner voice or the voice of, well, you could even say your higher self, but that gut instinct, when you go, oh, I got this instinct, I got this feeling, that's intuition. And,
Mm.
when I first noticed it, uh, you know, I was born telepathic. So I have a twin brother. Whether he's telepathic or he must be, but I don't know. If you asked me, would go, oh, you're just being ridiculous. And I just grew up thinking that, all twins were telepathic. So I knew when he was hurt, I would have this almost anxiety feeling. And we would take these long trips in the summer. And I don't know, we were, I didn't really know it at the time, but I know we were having these conversations in our mind. But when we would talk and open up our mouths, we would say the same thing. We would buy our mother the same birthday gifts, same birthday cards. So I was aware of it pretty early on. I just didn't know what to call it, and I did have these moments um, where I just knew things. I just knew things. I grew up in LA, California, and I knew when earthquakes were coming. I could tell several days beforehand. So for me, it's always been there. But when it came to the telepathy, which I'm sure everyone can identify, with, is, I always knew when people were lying to me. And in the beginning, I would say, no, you're lying. And then they would get really mad, right? And well, I wasn't making a lot of friends that way.
Okay.
Nope.
So I have a question because you said a lot and some really good juicy stuff. Because I know you and I know that you're an astrologist, I was listening to you talk about knowing that earthquakes were coming and different things like that. And so those are like natural things, but did that tie into your desire to want to do astrology in any way? Just being able to feel the shifts in the universe in such a way.
Um, I think really it was more my curiosity.
Mm.
I had my first chart done when I was I may have been 17 maybe. And this woman, and actually before that I would read the horoscopes
Mm-hmm.
and notice, you know, I was comparing it to my knowing and then reading it and then going, hmm. So it was that kind of awareness. But um, after I had my first chart reading, it was life changing for me. And really, what interested me in astrology was a curiosity. I love human beings. I was so
Mm-hmm.
curious as to what makes them tick because like I was saying just earlier really quick is that that telepathy and catching people lying and not making a lot of friends. I started to think that there was something wrong with me. What's
Mm.
wrong with me? I didn't identify it as me being telepathic. I can read your mind and I know you're lying to me. I started going, what's wrong with me? Why do people lie to me? Why do people lie to me? And until I took a clairvoyant program, which is a school, it's called Intuitive Insights that I teach at now. When the class of telepathy came up, oh, my whole life of wounds of what was matter with me melted away. I was just telepathic, you know?
And I love that because the whole intention for the podcast is to bring your intuition more mainstream in the understanding of just that very thing. What's wrong with me? Because I remember as early as probably 14 walking in stores and deeply feeling people's energy and not knowing what that was. And I didn't have the privilege when I was growing up to be in a community of people who understood their intuition and who even spoke of the word intuition. So just imagine being very intuitive and being in a space where those words weren't ever, it was a foreign language at that time to me. And so I used to feel like just that thing. What's wrong with me when I can walk in a store and feel someone's energy so deeply, and not only feel their energy so deeply, know what they're moving through, and then a step further, feel like I need to go and talk to them and I have a message for them. And I'm like, oh my gosh, I'm the only person I know that don't know this person, but feel like I know this person, don't know this person, but feel like I have a message for this person. And I wasn't the only one. I was the only one that I knew that was brave enough to speak of it.
Oh,
Because I would tell people like, oh, this person is going through that. And then it became like a joke. Oh, what's that? What's going on with that person, Janine? And like, but acting in a joking way. And it was so funny because probably about 2 months ago now, my brother called me and he was like, Janine, do you remember when we used to laugh at you because you were telling us computers are going to take over the world and one day everything is going to be computerized and ran by computer? And he's like, who's laughing now?
oh no.
And they did, like, and I used to cry like, no, you guys have to listen. And I think that's important because sometimes, and it's even, thank God my parents didn't, but my thoughts were so deep into the future at times where, like, I remember one time my mom took me to see a psychiatrist because I couldn't interpret the messages and visions and all of these things that I was getting. And they wanted to put me on medication, and my dad was like, that's not happening.
Thanks,
But
Dad.
yeah, right. But the
Yeah.
thing about that is that how many people are, and not to say that like mental illnesses aren't a real thing because I know that they are, but I also know that there's a deep connection to being intuitive and mental illnesses. Even schizophrenia has been scientifically linked to being highly intuitive. All of these different mental illnesses that we have can be linked to the lack of understanding of your intuition.
Yeah,
So,
my grandmother was schizophrenic.
mhm.
Yeah, and, they sh in those days, she was institutionalized for a year. She got the shock therapy and all those things, and, but she was a big part of raising us, I mean, she was in the household, you know,
Yeah, and
growing up.
it's so funny because I think it's a direct link to mental illnesses in general, but especially bipolar and schizophrenic, who not only are they very intuitive, but their children want it's like they couldn't manage it to say, and then their children are the offsprings of them seem to have a better understanding of their intuition. Have you
Yes,
noticed that?
huh? I'm sorry.
I said, have you noticed that pattern?
Well, yeah, my mom was really intuitive. I mean, she
Mhm.
was. And she went to psychics. She liked psychics, and she was the one who, got me my first astrology chart read. But I have noticed it because, I was gifted with the most beautiful daughter.
Mhm.
And, she, I mean, before she was even two, she was telling me things. Like she knew when my mother was going to pass away. I mean, she literally told me, and that afternoon my mom passed away.
Oh,
And
wow.
yeah, and giving me messages from angels. And
Mm.
because I I had that myself growing up, I didn't smash it. I didn't what I call poo-poo it. I listened.
Mhm.
And she would know things. Like she would get in the car after school and say, "Hey mom, do you know just these wild facts that there's no way she wasn't old enough to read it. They weren't subjects really that I knew anybody around her would be talking about. And I'd
Wow.
say, "How do you know that?" She goes, "I don't know." So, yeah, I agree that, in the generations that it it can get stronger and stronger. But I also believe too, it's the time on our planet where we're in this time of huge evolution. And the kids coming in today, especially I get starting a lot, I think, well, with my daughters, she's 24 now, um, the generation in particular, the kids come in with they, she knew way more than I did. If you want to learn something, talk to a child, right? From the mouth of babes, they say. Yeah. So I agree with you on that. Yeah.
What would you say? And this is beautiful because a lot of people um have other people in their family who do practice understanding and developing their intuition. And then there's a lot of people who don't have that, me being one of those people. So I can speak to my experience, but like having that support to be open to explore higher realms of reality, right? How would you say, I mean, you wouldn't know because you didn't experience it any other way, but being a teacher of people with their and like hearing my story about how it wasn't widely available for me, but still I understood and knew even if I didn't know. How was it for you having that support, and how do you think it shaped the development of your intuition?
Well, it's interesting because I really didn't have support per se.
Hmm.
I was told, "Oh, Corey, don't be silly." Oh, Corey, you're just being silly. So it was poo-pooed, but it was also laughed at. Um, my mom was intuitive, but she wouldn't have called herself intuitive. I don't think she was aware that she was really that intuitive. So, it wasn't really supported. It wasn't, well, it was, I mean, in my generation, uh, we were taught that, to respect authority, you act a certain way. And so when yeah, it was it was kind of a big dichotomy in my household actually. Because
Mhm.
my brother was in a car accident and I was I was with friends and I knew the second it happened and I told him not to drive. I go, "Don't drive. You're going to get into an accident." But he did. And but my friends made me wait till the morning. And when I showed up at the house and the door was locked and I knocked on it, my mom answered. I literally just said, "Oh my gosh, how's his face? Is he okay?" And she just looked at me and just opened the door. So I think my mom had somewhat of a fascination about it,
Mhm.
but I mean, she was raised in a Catholic boarding school, bless her heart. No, so you know, and she had a mother that was mentally ill, so it was this weird dichotomy. So
But she understood intuition and she even took you to visit
yeah,
with you. So it was some understanding and knowledge of it. So it gave you that. What did
yes,
that do for you?
yeah, this is true. So I guess yes, there in some ways I was supported. Um,
Well, it's not even so much supported. How do you think that influenced you to be more open? And I guess the question that I'm really
hmm,
asking is like, because when it's an untapped understanding for you, are you more likely to lean into the curiosity of it or less likely? And I think it's an individual thing that, it just depends on how strong the calling is on your life. But I'm just really wondering for each person. And the reason for the question is because I know that your story has meaning not only to you, but someone else as well that's going to be looking and listening to this. And that's just that, oh, I'm not alone in having this or feeling this. So, really, the emotion behind like becoming the version of yourself that you are now, and just whatever it took to get there, and the things that you had to push through and his family dynamic is a big part of it for what I'm really seeing for the collective now and why even because I've been thinking about doing this podcast for a while, but the urge for it in the collective is very strong now for people, not for us to give them permission, but for them to give their self permission to answer that calling. And I believe it's a calling for light workers to show up and kind of share their stories so
yeah.
people can know that they're not alone on this journey of self discovery.
Yeah, and by doing this podcast, there's now people to relate to and to go to seek answers. So I
Yes.
think for me, I've just always been a seeker, you know,
Mhm.
and I think that with my family, my mom was really curious, so I think it was really the curiosity, but you know, there was, some suffering, personal suffering, because I didn't fit in any box that people kept trying to shove me into, you know? I just, I just didn't fit in the box. I grew up with a twin brother, so I was a tomboy, you know? My mom was like, "You're gonna be a lady if it kills me." You know? Okay. You know? So there's these boxes, and I never fit into the boxes. So, but I think it really was the family dynamics of my mom really being so curious, like to kind of, go to a psychic or, you know, what's an astrology chart? What is it that that really helped me um, uh, to pursue that. But you know what, too, is that also because I'm a seeker, and I was just born a seeker, that I had so many wounds.
Mm,
I had a lot of wounds, and I just wanted, I just, I just didn't want to feel those wounds anymore. You know,
mhm,
I'll, divulge this, I'm a recovering alcoholic. I'm sober for a long time. Um, so, I somewhat, not somewhat, but, um, getting sober and going to a 12-step program. I didn't
mhm,
grow up with a higher power. I didn't know anything. And so, inside I was like, well, I kind of knew there was a God, but so it was that seeking. So really that was what started me on my spiritual journey, on healing
mhm.
myself. And therefore, that journey of self-healing,
Mhm.
you know?
I love that
Yeah,
because
really, that's
when I teach or enlighten, I like to say, because I don't feel like we're teaching anyone anything most of the time. It's just my own personal belief. It's kind of rediscovering that thing that you're kind of like in the amnesia came about, because we've all been through this many times. And so being human is part of the amnesia game, right?
right.
But when I'm coming to discover in a deep, deep understanding, and I even think about my own journey to becoming this version of me that I am today. It started with me wanting to put me in the equation, not even first, just in the equation as being a woman and having a family and a business and all of these different things. And I dove deep into this journey of self love. And what I discovered was self love and self discovery is the calapace to intuition and enhancing your abilities, because once you're still enough to feel, sense, and imagine what's happening all around you, for you, and to you, then it just heightens and enhances your intuition. So when I tell people, like, oh, let's do this journey of self love, and they're like, oh, I want to be psychic, I'm like, yeah, I know.
Well,
But
yeah,
it's
but it's and I love that because it starts with um that journey of self-love starts with valuing ourselves enough to commit to self-discovery
yeah.
and or self-love. And
Mhm,
in that process, we actually start to value ourselves, value our
mhm.
feelings, and put ourselves, commit to working on ourselves. And so that value really grows. Yeah.
And then the value is a surplus to the discovery, because
Mm.
we're so detached from our true feelings, our true emotions, our true self. It's amazing. Like, I was working with a client the other day, and I won't say her name, but I was telling her, so I'm like seeing all of these stories and programs and different things that's running in her field that literally, like, it's and you know this, Corey, but just the images that you get. And I'm like, this is really interesting. I don't even know how to interpret this. I knew how to interpret it, but like, how do I knew what it meant, but I'm like, how do I interpret it so she can know what it means, right? So it's like, oh, well, let me just say what I get and then what I got. And it was so funny because part of the message that was coming through for her was to give herself permission to honor what she was feeling at that moment, because a lot of times we feel things and we compartmentalize our emotions because we don't want to sit with them and understand them. And like we feel like, oh, we're judging someone, or and it's not so much about judging somebody, it's about allowing yourself to feel what you're feeling. And people don't understand the difference a lot of times about having emotion to a feeling, and that there is a difference.
Yeah. And I have to tell you, is, the subject of feelings. Well, we weren't allowed to really have any, not that we were not allowed to have feelings, but any extreme feelings growing up because our grandmother was too sensitive.
Mm.
And so we weren't allowed to fight. Um, crying, we could cry, but it was definitely kept at bay.
Limited. Okay,
Yeah.
that's enough of that. I
Oh,
remember
yeah.
hearing that as a kid. Okay, it's enough. You cried
Yep.
enough. Now go sit
Yep.
down.
Okay. Yeah. You're disrupting your grandmother. And gosh, I don't hate her. I don't have any. I'm grateful. I'm grateful for my childhood because um, it's what I signed up to come into that family so that I could be where I am today. It's those dichotomies, but hence what led to my, alcoholism and drug addiction.
Mm.
Because anytime those feelings came up, um, I was just brought up that they weren't allowed. So it allowed those, it kept those feelings at bay. And then choosing a career that your feelings don't matter.
Mm.
you know um but we only know what we know when we know it.
So would you say that like you said a lot, and I really want to kind of get deeper into what you said because I don't want people to miss that, because I think it's very important to the message and the lesson and the understanding of oneself. When you mentioned like drugs and alcohol was a coping mechanism of not coping,
Yeah.
so I just
Well,
want
it's
to.
a way of coping,
Well, yeah, but it's really not
but
coping.
but
When you think about it,
yeah.
it's more dull and dimming your emotions. And it's kind of
Oh,
that
yeah.
compartmentalizing that I was talking about.
Yeah.
So you're quieting yourself. So it's really not coping, because are you really coping with the problem, right?
No, it's
Then why?
escaping.
Yeah, it's escapism, and it's like not confronting. So but as you said, it came from alert behavior. And it's important and that's why I really paused, because I'm like, oh, that's big. Because what I heard was I wasn't allowed to express myself.
Mhm.
I wasn't allowed to heal out loud.
Mhm.
So when I got older, I repeated that pattern of not being able to do that, but then I used other things to compress the need or the desire, or whatever you want to say. I don't want to put words in your mouth, but I'm just telling you from the way I understood what you said. Like your way of expression became drugs and alcohol, because you still,
And
even as,
suppression.
yeah,
No, it was
exactly,
just that's what I was raised with, suppression, right?
yeah.
So, I get out into the world, what am I going to do? I still have to suppress.
Hmm. And I think that's important for people to understand, because we all have at least one family member. My whole family growing up was on some kind of drugs or alcohol or both. But like, what were they escaping? The reality of what? And I think for most
Feelings.
people, yeah, for most people who are doing drugs, they're either searching for a feeling outside of themselves that they can only find within, or escaping a feeling that's inside that's unbearable, or so
And
they think is unbearable. So they do all of these self-harming things instead of just confronting the trauma that was, and this is a point to trauma doesn't always look like trauma, because even though it was traumatic for you not to be able to express yourself, you, I'm pretty sure, didn't feel abused at the time, but like, can you speak to that a little bit?
Well, no, I didn't feel abused at the time. It was just really what, I was not raised with tools on how to deal with emotions.
Mm-hmm.
So hence, the alcohol and the drugs, because, I was taught to suppress them.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and it was all that I knew. So, and that's just the way I was raised. We weren't allowed to have those feelings. And then naturally choosing a career in film and television where you don't get to feel. The actors get to feel. You don't get to feel. And your opinion doesn't matter.
Mm-hmm.
So natural, that was, of course, that's what I chose because that's what I knew. I
Yeah.
wasn't given any tools. And it wasn't until I got into a 12-step program and years into it, I was scared to death of my feelings. I didn't know. I just didn't know. I was just scared to death of feelings. Um, and until, it was actually my daughter that,
Just gonna ask you, how did that um play out in the raising of her in like her self-expression?
well, astrologically, she doesn't have any water in her chart. So the water in astrology is the emotions. And I had that astrologer that did my first chart do her chart when she was a baby, months
Mhm.
old. And she said she has no water in her chart. The best thing you can do is help her with feeling, identifying feelings, and giving her tools to deal with her feelings. And I
And
was like,
isn't that amazing? The one thing that you struggle with. And let me just stop here and say, hold the phone, because the one thing that you struggle with, or not even struggle with, but that was an obstacle
you
for
could say,
you.
yeah, I struggled with it. Yeah.
Well, yeah, but I'm saying, but on a even broader note, this was the thing that was huge in your life, and then you have a child that you have to practice this with and instill this in her. So it's like polar opposites. Everything that you didn't get, there you're being guided to gift her, and then you sought out this information like intuitively. It was like, okay, you need to know this because you may not follow the nudges because it's not something that you're comfortable with, so you have to get comfortable with being uncomfortable, I'm sure. Can you speak to that?
Yeah. Honestly, this is my first love will always be astrology.
Mm,
And because to me, it just, I'm always in awe on how the universe, the divine has orchestrated our planet Earth, right?
yeah.
I'm always like getting a daughter who has no water in her chart, and I have to teach her about feelings. And, you know, I've had to work so hard at feelings. And
Yes.
yeah. So one of the things is I was like, okay, so um how am I going to do this? And I've always been guided though. Always ask God for help. Okay. All right, God, this one's on you because I don't know what to do with it, right? Um I just listened to her. And when she could express feelings, I would validate those feelings. So it really started with validating who she was.
Hmm.
That um and or I sit there and try and help her identify what her feelings were.
Hmm.
I didn't raise her like everyone else. It was always I didn't. I tried on occasions, with the Girl Scout troops and all that. But like I let her watch anime, the and it helped her because this was it helped her watch because the Japanese anime is very emotional.
Mm-hmm.
And when she started to talk to me also about, oh, so and so, they were feeling this, and I felt like that.
Mm-hmm.
And I go, like my daughter is my teacher as well, you know.
Yeah, I was gonna ask you, how does that, like, looking back in your childhood and the points where you didn't get something, but you found yourself giving it to her. And this is a really beautiful, and I don't know if you ever thought of it this way, but you have these patterns, right? Of my mom did it, so I'm doing it. But you were divinely guiding through your astrologist to be polar opposites from the way that your life was being raised, of showing up, show more emotions, allow more emotions. So how did that play out in moments, or did you even notice moments where you were helping her through something that you knew that you didn't get help through, and like, oh, this is what it would have looked like for me? And were you able to do some inner child healing through raising her?
That is such a great question, Janine. That's such a great question. You know, um, I'm sure we've all said at some point in time, growing up in a family, it's like, I'm never going to be like my mother. Oh, I'm never going to be like my father. Right. And that carried on to, I'm not going to raise my daughter like I was raised.
Mm-hmm.
Now, granted, my mother and my father did the best that they could with whatever
Absolutely.
tools they were given. I don't blame them for anything. Um, and that was something I had to work through. But one of the things is that my mom wasn't a great communicator with us children. She struggled. So I started there. You know what? When my daughter has something to say, I'm just going to sit and I'm going to listen. And through that, I started healing my own inner child
You
because,
were healing me regardless if you knew you were or not, but how aware of it were you really, right?
I was pretty aware of it because I had made that decision
Mm-hmm.
when I was pregnant with her that I
Mm-hmm.
was going to do things differently. This was my opportunity.
Yeah.
And so there were these it's interesting because it was deliberate decisions, but it was almost like a driving force,
Mm-hmm.
you know.
I love that.
I don't want to be like that. Like no, I'm not going to raise. So that meant that when she was talking, I had to listen.
Mhm.
It didn't matter how busy I was. I had things to do. I would pause and just go, you know what? You said you'd do it differently. Have a seat, Corey.
Mhm.
Listen to her. And so there we could start having the discussions. Well, how do you feel? I don't know. And but it basically really started with just listening.
And in that listening, did you ever have moments of very uncomfortable things where you knew, like, oh, this is healing something or this is moving something? And can you speak to just one that stands out where you had a full body healing, or like a really healing in that moment that was undeniable, a clearing, because the thing that happens is we're ever evolving and healing, whether we know we are or not. And I think in shared experiences like this, people can identify with them and say, "Oh, I've had that happen before. I had no idea what's happening." Especially a parent to child experience, whether it's mother, daughter, father, son, son, daughter, it doesn't matter. Like, we're all having the beautifulest healings and reflections through our children that I think are overlooked or misunderstood. Even the hugest fights and breakups and breakouts, there's healing in there if you allow it to be. So if you could speak to a moment where you notice, like, oh wow, that was a shift in me.
You know, a lot of those.
Yeah, that's what I said. Just pick out one.
I,
That was
I had a
like,
lot of those. Well, my daughter, well, we had some, traumatic times together. And I couldn't get her out of her room for almost a year. She was so
mm,
shut down. And I was just so worried. I felt very like, oh my gosh, I'm the worst mother ever. And I had a lot of people telling me, well, you need to do this, you need to do that, you need to do this, you need to do that. And I just followed my intuition. And there were, I made a promise to myself that I would listen to my daughter. Like, if
mm,
she said, no, mommy, I don't want to do that, I'd say, okay. But, after getting her out of the house after a year and, starting that spiritual journey, that because very close to then, we found intuitive insights, a clairvoyant program. And I actually did it for her,
mhm.
but she wasn't old enough.
So in this year of her being home, was she not going to school either? Was she just in the house the whole time?
Yeah, I had to homeschool her because she
Mhm,
was not able to attend school. There's, other factors. And
mhm,
a lot of the mothers are saying, "You're what are you? How are you going to homeschool her? Like, you're so busy." So my mom worked, and one of my biggest fears was that um, I would do as my mother did, was to put work first, not understanding as a child, you got to work. Um, and I said, you know what? I will find a way. I will find the time because I can't keep throwing her to the wolves. And when I said that, I actually, gosh, tears could come to my eyes now, but, I can feel that, right?
mhm.
Is that, that was a huge moment where my inner child um, was healed because I was not only, um, not only willing to go to any length to help my daughter. It was the healing in my inner child that somebody was willing to go to any length to help me. And so that healing inside of my inner child by doing the things for her, by not throwing her to the wolves and doing, you know, things that were seemingly impossible
Yeah.
was a big, huge healing for
Mhm.
me. Not just saying it, but actually doing it.
Yeah.
Like
The
I had to pull her out
movement
of
of it.
yeah,
I love that. Wow.
yeah.
I feel that right now. And it's just, like, I think we all have those moments, but like really understanding the shifts. Cause sometimes we're having big shifts and we don't even realize that we're having big shifts.
Mhm.
Um, my mom She had many ups and downs in her life, and we had those shared experiences together as well. One of the things that is the biggest blessing to me from her is that my mom was raised by her aunt, her great aunt, actually. Um, and back then, they didn't really show a lot of affection.
Yeah.
And it was just a way of life, like they didn't hug, they didn't say I love you. And one of my favorite aunts, um, her children, she didn't hug them. We were probably close. I mean, we were really close. And I can remember her telling me that she loved me, but I remember having one of her children tell me that she couldn't really recall her mom saying that much, you know. Um, but I state that to state that my mom would say, like, she didn't get affection, she didn't get love when she was growing up. And I witnessed it from a lot of my peers. But my mom was so loving and so affectionate to us. I mean, overwhelmingly loving and affectionate. And, without any guidance, because she pretty much, she had got well taken care of far as the bare minimums of necessities, but mentally and emotionally not really. And she made sure that she gave us everything that she desired without being taught how to. It's like
Yeah.
nobody taught her how to love, but the way she loved, it's like there's no way that you didn't get that because you're a master at it. And so I think that it's really like a beautiful understanding that we get to choose how we show up in this world, in the power of choosing. Like, we don't have to repeat these cycles. We don't have to repeat these cycles. Follow your heart and what's in it, not what you were exposed to. And if you were exposed to what's in your heart, then that's a different story. And it doesn't have to be good nor bad because we decide really what's good and bad. And I'm not going to even go down that rat race.
Yeah.
But, the thing is, I witnessed her give something that she had no idea how, other than a longing for it and a desire for it, the affection, the love, and the embrace of feeling nurtured, heard, understood, and to hear you express like how you promised yourself that you would do it different and you would do what you probably didn't even know that you were longing for is such a beautiful thing. And I hear you say like I was intuitively guided or I listened to my intuition. Can you, in your own words, and this is important because it's different for everybody, but what does intuition mean to you and like how would you describe it just for your own inner self?
Well, I spent a lot of years not listening to my intuition. Okay. So, intuition for me, and what's wonderful is intuition for me. The beautiful thing about intuition is it's ever changing and growing.
Mhm,
So, intuition to me is listening to my gut instincts.
mhm,
When I have this clear knowing, trusting it and following it. There's a lot of faith in it. There's a lot of faith that I'm getting this gut feeling, this knowingness for a reason. And I'm just going to have the faith that if I follow it, it's going to be for my highest and greatest good.
mhm,
Intuition is also, there are so many forms of intuition. Like I have a clear knowing, like some people just know things. Some people feel it in their bodies. Like when I always, well, I kind of equate it to, God knocking on the hood of a car. Hello, clink, 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 clink. Intuition is when you get that little knock. Some people get a feeling, you know, like when something's not right, their stomach starts to hurt. That can be the beginning of intuition because our bodies never lie to us.
Mm-hmm.
And when we feel it, that's our intuition. It's our body screaming, trying to tell us something.
Listen to me.
Yeah. Hello, hello, hello. Um,
That we ever so much want to ignore, right?
yeah.
All
Oh,
the time.
yeah. I mean, I was brought up to ignore it. I was brought up to ignore it, that I was just silly. Just do as you're told, you
And
know,
with
don't,
that, not to cut you off, but with that, it's so funny because a lot of times we're encouraged to ignore our intuition for safety, which it is the most way to stay safe in life. And is there really a safe way in life? Just, like what a safety really is. But yeah,
yeah. And, y- our society has been, raised that, um, outside sources can fix us, like the
yeah,
car, the house, the marriage, the children, Amazon, the latest new tech thing,
the
right?
latest new anything. And that is the next question. How do you distinguish between fear, intuition, your inner guidance, and your ego life because they're all playing roles in how we show up every day. And how do you distinguish the difference between am I leaning into my ego? And the ego is so overly whelmed, misunderstood. And I think I'm gonna do a whole series on what does the ego mean to you and how does it show up for you. But like how do you distinguish through your daily life? Oh, I'm operating out of fear, or oh, I really need to listen to this gut feeling, that's my intuition. How are you, owning that discernment in your intuition? And how do you
Well,
figure it out?
well, it's been a long journey. One of the things is that, uh, a 12-step program actually helped me uh, realize what fear was. I didn't even know what anger was.
Mm.
You know, I got sober young. I did. I was 27. And in
Oh,
those days, it was really young. And I didn't even know what anger was. I had no idea who I was. So it took a lot of work to even get to know who Corey was, what
mhm,
fear was, what my ego was, what my character defects or defaults were, because I had no idea who I was. I had not a clue. So I really started there, was that self-discovery, learning the basics because we weren't able to feel. So, you know, what was fear? You know,
mhm,
my anger really was, when you really looked at my anger, it was really fear.
mhm.
So today, and I want to say one thing which will help put things together, was that by putting my daughter in a clairvoyant program, which I had to take it with her, darn it, in order for her to do it. And she needed it, though. She needed it. And so did I. When I finally learned that my feelings were my superpower
Mhm,
and not a curse that I was brought up my whole life. Feelings were curses. You just avoid them at all costs.
mhm.
that's when a lot of things opened up for me. That to realize that my feelings were my superpower. They were there to give me messages.
I love that.
And um, it opened up a whole bunch of things. So
Hmm.
when, when we go on that journey of self-love, and self-discovery, for me, those were the things, I learned. What are my fears? I didn't even know. I mean, I wasn't sure. What are my fears? What
Hmm.
does my ego say? And I think those are really important things to learn, because society is, we're all raised to look outwards to define us. I found this in, quite a bit of my students, more last year, um, is that uh, they were all still, it was really a challenge for them to trust themselves. They were used to consuming, going to outside psychics,
That was
outside
the next
readers.
question for you, actually. Like, how is it when do you like what is your daily practice, and is there times where you don't trust your own intuition even now, and how do you move through those?
No, there's no time I don't trust my intuition anymore.
That's great. And then
I know.
did you have a daily practice
Yes.
like that really keeps you centered?
Yes. So in the mornings, uh and when my daughter was little, I'd wake up 2 hours before she got up, you know. So I would have commitment for me time. But in the mornings I
Mm,
meditate, and I run my energy and listen to that still small voice. I've always been extremely active.
mhm,
Kind of a backstory quick. Always been very active. And that's how I could hear my intuition, was through activity. Whether it was like cleaning up the kitchen, going for a run, whatever it was. But I wasn't listening.
mm.
Still a little self-willed, wanting to do things my way.
Yeah, I know
And I
that.
shattered, yep, and I shattered my heel, shattered it, gone. And that was a moment where I go, okay, God, source creator. All right, I get it. And I had to lay on a couch for 4 months, still scared. I literally cried, how am I going to hear spirit? How am I going to even tap into my intuition? I can't move. But it was the best thing that happened to me. So in the morning, that meditation and being still
Mhm. I love that.
is so important. And throughout the day, you know, I I often ask myself when answering somebody, talking to somebody, or even, interacting, I'll ask myself, what is the loving thing to say for all concerned? What
Mm,
is the loving thing to do for all concerned? And so I work I I if I don't do my meditation and I don't connect to my team, I recently just started going my team, because for me it's never been important as to, do I have a spirit guide? Do I have a higher self? What are their names? What do they do? I don't know. Maybe one day it will be important to me, but it's not right now. So when I sit and meditate and put my focus on love, and I do that from connecting to my team, then I can look at the world with loving, caring eyes. When my ego flares up, I can feel it in my body. I can feel it in my body and it's uncomfortable. So I pause and I clear it. Still have the human condition,
Oh, yeah, of course.
but for me, my daily practice all day long is to focus on love.
Mhm.
And I was told a long time ago, if you want love, give love.
I was just going to ask you, what does focusing on love look like to you? And what is the main? I mean, there's so many tips, but if you just had to pick one tip to give someone who's on their journey at any point, like what is your biggest nugget that you have to offer the collective in being in an awakened space or on the journey to one? Because I feel like we're all awakened to some level. It's just that next level of awakening.
Don't give up on yourself.
Mm.
That's the biggest nugget. Don't give up on yourself because the journey sometimes gets rough. Sometimes, really does, when we're healing a lot of things and we just want to walk away or we just want to give up. Don't give up. And love others as you want to be loved. Love
Yeah,
yourself as you wished you got love or that you want it.
yeah.
Those are really the biggest. Don't give up on yourself.
I think the last both, but the last one is a message that I often echo because I'm always telling people what you're trying to outsource, you can only find within. So a lot of times we're trying to do these, I'm looking for love in all the wrong places, but it's because it's within, you know.
Yeah. I
And
I heard a great quote um, from one of my favorite astrologers. Um, and I was like, "Ah, that's it. Try to live from the inside out,
mhm.
not the outside in."
Yes, and that is the secret sauce, right? But how do you do that? Well, of course, it's possible, and it's work, and it's a deeper understanding of oneself. I believe is the main way. And astrology is such a vast vessel and so important. And what I want to understand for myself, but also I'm pretty sure someone else probably is thinking this, like, how would you explain astrology? Like, what does it mean and what is the importance of it as a modality?
Well, astrology is our soul's blueprint.
Hmm.
And I mean, I know that I can say this for both of us, everything is energy, everything. We are energetic beings in a physical body. And the energy of astrology, gives you your soul blueprint as to uh, the blueprint that you were born with at the time that you were born. That helps to navigate the world around you and your
Hmm.
inner world. Astrology helps you. When I do chart readings, my intention is to help you learn to love yourself
Hmm.
because with astrology it's that blueprint, the way that the divine made you, and in those charts you get to learn um, why you are the way you are, not what's wrong with me,
Hmm.
but oh, this is my blueprint. And then also helps to give you solutions as to how could you change that? What what energies can support you in growing through that or taking advantage of, um, some greater aspects that are in there. And
Mhm.
astrology for me fascinates me because it always fascinates me how, how God created our whole universe. And then how um, everyone and everything in our life, how it's really orchestrated that you can find through astrology. I think my main thing with astrology is it's helped me navigate through life. So if I go somewhere and everybody's like, mad or, I go, whoop, there's that Mars and Aries. Woo! Everybody's fired up today. And I don't have to take it personally, right?
Yeah,
Don't have to go back to what's wrong with me.
yeah, I love that.
So the energies, it helps us navigate the energies of the universe, energies within ourselves, the blueprint, and um, and it's vast.
It
It's ever
is.
growing and
It,
changing.
that's why I said this vast vessel, right?
Yeah,
Um,
you never get bored with it.
you can't in I mean, like I should never say never, but I'm fascinated with astrology. I don't think I'll ever become an astrologist, but I have deep love and respect for people who are. Um, but I know just by working with people, understanding the moon cycles and the energy that's here and how it affects you, because some people are deeply affected by the cycles. And it's like, I don't know, every couple of days, every couple of weeks, I feel this way. And it's like the more we understand the portals and the moon cycles, we understand how we are affected to it. And it doesn't have to be in a bad way. It's understanding how to harness the energy of those cycles is really important to your soul's evolution as well, I believe.
You know what? Yes, very much so. It is important for soul's evolution. And the moon is our emotions. So
Yeah.
actually how we were made. The moon changes every 2 days. So, emotionally we're feeling different every 2 days. Like, come on, what are the chances? When there's a full moon, hospitals are really busy, you know,
Yeah.
the police are really busy, and
Yeah.
people have a tendency to like, woo, you know, and it's because the energy, the way that the moon, when it's full moon, and then let's put like a full super moon or any of those on top of it, it is coming around to the earth at much closer. So the magnetic pull,
Hmm.
it affects everything and everyone on planet Earth. And if you don't know, you feel like you're going crazy. You do. And some people
That is
do
a true
actually.
thing, and that's why I said the importance of it, and why I even started to study more of the moon cycles
Hmm?
and the understanding of the moon cycles, and I share it with my community because I think it's important for them to understand, oh, this is why I'm moving through this, or like, not even understand it, be aware of it to bring it to their once you have something in your conscious, then you're not living from your self-conscious or operating from your self-conscious. So once you're conscious of what's happening around you, then you're more connected to what's happening around you. Because if you're just kind of floating and you're not connected to what's happening around you, then you're not aware to be aware.
Right. And so that it's bringing the subconscious mind to the conscious mind. So
Yeah,
say if the moon is in
absolutely.
a water sign, we're going to feel more emotional.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
If it's in a fire sign, we're going to maybe get some more things done or
Yes.
have a feeling, or be able to express our feelings, and that plays in our natal chart too. The moon, whatever your moon sign is in, that's your emotional makeup, your emotional blueprint.
Yeah, I have to check mine. We always have these conversations. Like, I'll check, Corey.
I know. Well, what is yours? Yours is
I
I
don't
want to say,
remember.
well, let's see.
We'll figure it out, but
Figure it out. But let's just say, for example, like and it's about the four elements. That's what astrology also does. It connects earth to the energies. And
mhm,
we have earth element, water element, fire element, um, earth, air, and air element.
mhm,
We're all made up of those elements inside in our blueprint. And so, for example, what if you don't have any water in your chart, like my daughter?
mhm,
You know that that lifetime is if they so choose, but what is best for them to have a fulfilling life is they came here to learn about feelings and
mhm.
emotions, right?
Yeah, I love that.
Right.
This has been lovely, and we can go all day
I
long.
know we can, yes, we
Once
could.
we get started, I lose track of time. But thank you so much for your time and all of your wisdom. I'm
Janine,
gonna
thank you so much. I'm so proud of you. I'm
thank you.
so proud of you and your journey and the beautiful woman that you've become and all that you have to offer everyone. I'm so grateful that you've had me here to be a part of your podcast. It means so much to me. And
Yeah,
I wish you so much luck, and you have all my love and support.
I appreciate that, and I receive that. And thank you again for being here. Create a beautiful rest of your day, Corey.
Yes, you too.
Bye bye.